the kind of church that God is calling us to plant and establish, one of the most significant questions is recognizing the place. Where is God calling you to? And oftentimes God calls us to a place that's somewhere we might likely raise a family. It's a place that we're connected to. Maybe it's similar to how we grew up, but we need to take time to recognize the very place that God is calling us to, and what are some of those distinctives. When I think about those distinctives, is it rural? Is it urban? Is it suburban? Are we focusing on houses and different neighborhoods and niches that way, or are we focusing on an online presence and different kind of demographics of people that we might connect with online? Where is God calling you to? Taking time to discern this and define this will help you be effective in a sense accomplishing the vision that God is asking you to aim for. So take time to recognize that your history points to those that you will most likely connect with. Not only does your history point to that, but sometimes God calls us to something that's quite different than how we grew up. And so recognizing if it's cross-cultural, we need to think of it in that way. In these cases, we have to understand that the context that we're living in is foreign, and not to see things as things that we're opposed to, but rather conduits for the gospel. How can we live as missionaries? Whether it's familiar to us or cross-cultural, how can we live as missionaries in that context? So recognize these distinctions about the context that God is calling you to. So as you're thinking about this place, we want to encourage you to gather insights and deeper understanding of your cultural context and the people that God has called you to reach. I know for myself and my family, we've been a part of planting in a variety of different contexts, more suburban, urban, and then even for a season we were planting a church in an urban context. And every context was very different. And it took time to gather the insights about that context so that we plant a church that's connected to the location and the group of people that God's calling us to. So why should we study this? I think our posture is going to communicate a lot. We must first come as a learner, not someone who's got all the answers, but somebody who's a student of what's happening in that context. One of the ways I like to think of this is asking the question, where is God at work? How can I discover that? Rather than we've got all the answers, we're coming in with this posture of curiosity as a learner. What you learn then must impact what and how you plant that church. So what you learn impacts the church that eventually gets planted. And this is really key because sometimes as we walk through this prepare to plant process, we've had planters identify really clearly, here are the needs in our context, here are the realities in our context, and then when it comes to their vision statement of what it is that God's calling them to, it's quite disconnected from that. And I just want to encourage you that whatever you learn about your context, let that influence how you plant. For example, one of the churches that we planted was in the city of Seattle. And in the city of Seattle at the time that we were planting, there were fewer than 12% of the population that were Christians and that were attending church regularly. And one of the things we learned about the context was that people didn't only not attend church, they were opposed to the idea, and many of them had grown up generations removed from anyone who had ever attended church. So how we planted had to be influenced by that reality that people are not likely to come to a gathered expression of the church. How does the church then maybe approach things differently by going to where people are and where they live, work, and play, that kind of thing. So what you learn impacts how you plant. So what do we study? Study demographics. Those are the numbers and statistics that we'll see. The numerical representation of who the people are. Pay attention to things like age, education, income, family structures, diversity, types of homes, churches, social agencies. Then pay attention to the psychographics. The psychographics really tell you a bit about how people function, what's important to them. And then look at the sociographics, another layer that helps you understand the textures of the people and the needs that they feel together as a group of people in that context. And then look at case studies. One of the best ways to learn your context is to build relationships and hear what people say are the needs. So asking those questions and posturing yourself as a learner as you engage in those relationships. So the more that you know, the greater the burden is going to become. The more dependent you'll be on the Holy Spirit, listening to the Holy Spirit, the more that you will see opportunity for impact, and the more you'll discover what the good news is to your specific context, how you can contextualize the news of Jesus, the never-changing news of Jesus, to the ever-changing realities of our culture. So as we study these contexts and relationships, I want to encourage you to think about conversations, not just what you learn online, but actual conversations with people, and see what else supports that as you explore those relationships. There are a number of things that you can do as you try to discern more about this. You can look at the state of your city address. There's different demographic tools through the Alliance. We have a mission insight tool that can give you some really key insights into your context so that you learn the place really well. The right place informs everything about how you apply what it is that God has called you to. So again, just some best practices to think through in this way. Ask the question, Jesus, if you came to my town, what would you do? Where would you go? Who would you spend time with? Or another way to think of it is, Jesus, if you were leading the church that I'm called to lead, how would you do that? How would you go about that? Where would you go? Who are the people that you would spend time with? I think asking that question, those questions can be a really powerful way to get at an understanding of your context. And so we want to encourage you to take some time right now to reflect on the context that God has called you to identify, as you reflect on the context, what are those top needs? What are those things that are important to people? How will it then influence how you plant this church?